Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Caithness Amateur Dramantic Society tasting. I'm doing a series of videos in which I compare uh, Diageo's Distillers Edition from a distillery to the core range bottling from the same distillery. Started off with Glenkinchie, starting off in the lowlands. Now I'm going to go to Speyside. Uh, to Cragganmore, where we're going to have the Cragganmore 12-year-old uh, bottled at 40%, and Cragganmore, the Distillers Edition 2021 12-year-old double matured uh, bottled at 40%. Cragganmore is one of the most prolific in the Banffshire region of Speyside, where the distillery is located. And Cragganmore means big rock and comes from the Scottish Gaelic Cragganmore. Uh, the name refers to the local Cragganmore Hill, which is close to the distillery. Cragganmore's greenstone building materials were quarried from the hill, and Cragganmore has a reputation as the most complex Strathspey single malt. John Smith, who had previously been involved with Macallan, Glenlivet and Glenfarclas, founded Cragganmore in 1869. Smith was said to be one of the finest and most experienced distillers of his day, which seems to be an understandable title when we consider that he was managing director of Macallan, Glenlivet and Wishaw distilleries. Smith persuaded his landlord, Sir George Macpherson Grant, to lease him the land to build a new distillery at Ballindalach beside the Strathspey Railway. And Cragganmore was the first distillery in Scotland to have its site selected and be built specifically to take advantage of its proximity to the Strathspey Railway. Famously, after the private station was built at Cragganmore to accommodate the distillery traffic, Smith wanted to ride on the train, but as he was a large gentleman, he couldn't quite fit and had to ride in the guard's van instead. In 1887, the first whisky special left Ballindalach for Aberdeen with 300 casks of Cragganmore on board. In 1886, Smith passed away, leaving the business to his son Gordon, who was only 21 at the time. In 1901, Charles Doig, the famous distillery architect, renovated and refurbished Cragganmore, bringing the site into the 20th century with style. Tragically, Gordon only managed to run the distillery for a couple of decades, dying young in 1912. In the wake of his death, Mary Jane, Gordon's widow, took over the running of the distillery, and it continues to operate successfully, only stopping production in 1917 due to the restrictions of the First World War. Domestic rationing Britain had placed on the use of barley. However, Cragganmore didn't suffer too heavily from the conflict, with production resuming just a year later in 1918. And determined to stay with the time, Mary Jane had electric lighting installed, driven by a Kohler generator. Then, in 1923, the distillery was sold to the newly formed Cragganmore Distillery Company, where Mackie and Co. and Peter Mackie sharing half ownership with Sir George Macpherson Grant, making up the other half of the ownership. In 1927, due to a corporate merger, DCL comes to own 50% of Cragganmore Distillery. In 1931, hit by the recession of the 1930s, the distillery was forced to close. Limited production began in 1934, and then increased in 1935. With the outbreak of the Second World War in 1941, restrictions on the use of barley limited the production for the next 5 years. In 1961, the coal-fired pot stills were converted to a heat steam system, and in 1964 production capacity doubled, with the number of stills increasing to 4. One year later, in 1965, DCL finally bought out the other 50% of the company, becoming the sole owner of the distillery. And in 1974, all the stills were converted to steam heating, being at the forefront of the distillery innovation. In the 1988, the Cragganmore 12-year-old became one of 6 malts carefully selected to become part of United Distillers' classic malts range, which was met to enormous critical acclaim. Continue with this trend, in 1998, Cragganmore Distillers Edition Double Matured was launched for the first time. Now under the ownership of Diageo due to the acquisition of DCL, Cragganmore continued to go from strength to strength. In 2006, a 70-year-old from 1998 was released. Hopefully, as we progress into the 21st century, such releases will continue. Cragganmore Distillery draws its water from the mineral-rich Craggan Burn, which lies next to the distillery. The production capacity is 1.52 million per year, and the distillery allows the wash to ferment for a very long time in its traditional wooden washbacks made of European larch, which is a vital contributor to the spirit's taste. Cragganmore is one of the distilleries which still use wooden washbacks. It works 7 days a week to keep up with the high demand. The stills have a very distinctive pot still shape, which is an essential contributor to the distinctive taste of the spirit. Instead of the normal conical neck of a pot still, Cragganmore's pot stills have a flat top and a relatively short neck. Just 2 wash and 2 spirit stills which power the production. Lightly peated malt is used in the production of Cragganmore, which is now sourced from Diageo'S central maltings. The practice of floor maltings was ended at Cragganmore in the late 20th century. Diageo are meticulous about where they select their barley from, and usually select it from a range of lowland and Speyside farms, and they occasionally use lightly peated malt to produce a mildly smoky spirit. There's 3 on-site warehouses, which houses over 360,000 casks. They were built in 1925, and they use a combination of bourbon, sherry and port wine casks. The warehouses are of the dunnage type, and bottling is performed at a site in Leven in Fife. It's one of the most prolific in the Banffshire region of Speyside, and it has a reputation as the most complex stress spacing of malt. It's quite limited in supply, as it's one of the region's smallest distilleries. The distinct range of official bottlings includes a 12-year-old, a 21-year-old vintage, 25-year-old special release, a Distillers Edition, and Friends of the Classic Malts limited edition bottling. There's been a series of independent bottlings performed at the site, such as Signatory Vintage and Douglas Land, and it's possible to find older official bottlings, although these are not directly stocked by the distillery. Before the launch of the classic malts range, Cragganmore was mainly used for blending The first blend it was used for was the James Watson number 10 blend. Today, most of Cragganmore malt whisky is used for its own single malt, as well as the Old Parr and White Horse blends. Cragganmore's new make has a concentrated nose, meaty lamb stock, sulphur, sweet citrus and fruits behind it, hints of nut. The palate is big and strong with some smoke. Then the sulphur comes through. It's huge and dense, thick, oily, and an old style. It has weight and suppleness, and the finish is black fruits and sulphur. So let's see where we're going here. We've got the Cragganmore 12-year-old, a little 20cl bottle, picked up in the whisky shop, Fort William. If we can get into it. Might take a little while. Not the easiest whisky to get into. There we go. Not too good oil. But watch yourself on these oil things, they can cut your fingers. Cragganmore was one of my favourite whiskies when I was a lot younger. I just loved its honey, and it's quite unusual packaging and name. So the packaging of the 12-year-old is relatively straightforward. The plain clear glass bottle and not especially distinctive labelling are offset by the foil wrapper as you just saw, and a wood and cork stopper. It's bottled at 40%. It's predominantly matured in ex-bourbon barrels, but also a smaller percentage of ex-sherry barrels. And the colour, this is coloured ancho filtered, but it's a sort of pale gold colour. And it has a nice tight line, I would say. Not terribly thick tears. And the nose is quite aromatic. Floral, heather, fruit salad, creamy, smoked almonds and stenny hay. It's fragrant with spring meadow scents. Heatheriness again, hay and wildflowers. And there's a tinge of smoke, as if a fire was downwind. It's fruity, sweet and malty. There's aromas of baked apple and poached pear. And you get some golden syrup, dried fruit, especially sultanas, with a hint of raisin and vanilla fudge. Candied orange peel and fresh lemon zest. And beneath that is the distinct biscuit-like maltiness and a faint wisp of gentle peat smoke. Very nice nose on this. Try them out. It's rich, honeyed, stone fruits, chestnuts, walnuts, almonds, berries. It's quite light compared to the scent. Honey with a basket of nutty flavours. Bold and sweet with a malty structure. baked apple tart or tart tatin, and then it feels creamy yet robust, and the distinct biscuity maltiness from the nose underpins it all. It's like a combination of oat cookies and buttery shortbread, and you get some dried fruits coming through, raisins again, sultanas, and a hint of candied orange peel. And you get sort of nuttiness, a hint of toasted hazelnut and almond marzipan, and that sits in the background. And then you get more toffee and vanilla fudge, and the early apple notes are sort of more now a fairground toffee apple. And that faint wisp of peat smoke from the nose, plus hints of sandalwood, add extra depth and complexity. The smoke is very soft, sweet and gentle, and it embraces everything. And the finish is smoky, good length. There's a delicate peppery spice, and it rolls out into a pleasant smoky warmth, decent length. And it's here that the smoke comes through a little more. Some drying oak and a pinch of peppery spice, which develops nicely, especially once the fruity and sweet characteristics have faded. The oak lingers particularly well. Gonna add 5 drops of water to this. I inadvertently put 6 in. I always add just a little water and then try more if I think it needs it. Nice tight line on this again. And I get more cinnamon now. Cinnamon apples and earthy and grassy notes become more floral and aromatic. And the honey notes are nicely preserved. Water tones down the specific aromas a bit. And you get traces of sweet honey behind that. On the mouth, it's very earthy, smooth and a bit sweet. Red fruits and sugary barley, slightly bitter, and water adds sort of crispy honey and cereal notes. And the finish is sweet honey with a spicy and rubbery twist, oak tannins, hints of smoke buried in there as well. And it turns a little dry late in the aftertaste. It's a pleasant and only slightly complex sipper. Just the sort of thing for a go-to single malt for everyday drinking, or to use as a starter or next step scotch. It's probably not a typical Speyside due to the slightly heavier and more robust nature of the spirit, plus that wisp of soft peat smoke. And the smoke acts like seasoning in a good recipe. It underpins everything and accentuates other flavours. You know it's there, but it doesn't dominate. It's very nicely done, and this remains for me a delicious whiskey to sip and savour. I'm going to cleanse my palate with the Knorr milk honeycomb and caramel milk chocolate bar. So to compare that one with, I'm going to try the Cragganmore Distillers Edition 2021 12-year-old. Double matured at 40% ABV. So this was distilled in 2009 and bottled in 2021. And it's double matured in port cask to try and marry the succulence and depth with the signature malty, smoky flavours and finesse of Cragganmore. Port is a dessert line fortified with brandy. It's commonly associated with flavours of red fruits, spices, caramel and chocolate. Port barrels are used for finishing all kinds of spirits and beer, as its flavour profile often enriches these other spirits. And it's got a warm gold colour. This is the original here, and this is the so you can see, yes, it's definitely a little sorry about this, definitely this one, the Distillers Edition, a little darker than the original 12-year-old. And it's got nice tears. And now I get strawberry, raspberry and caramel. It's a vanilla custard, sweet jelly beans, malty. Distillers Edition is fruitier and juicier than the regular bottling. There's still a hint of smoke. Fresh, fruity, citrusy, tangerine, orange peel, a hint of vanilla and honey. Red apple and apricot, and a whiff of cinnamon, cloves, gingerbread, like a fruit tea. It's very nice. Try them out. It's firm and sweet with smoky undertones and fruitiness, malty, oaky and smoky at the base. It's intriguingly two-tiered, just as dessert-like as the nose, but not the same notes. It reminds me of a banana split, including a bit of vanilla ice cream. It's fruity, light pepper, subtle sweetness, apple, apricot, citrusy, gingerbread, spices, cardamom, cake dough, and a hint of leather and hay. So the finish is medium to long with fine oaky expressions, foam bananas and vanilla to cocoa. Much drier than it began with the wood spice. It's warm, fruity, spicy, zesty, citrusy, peppery, hints of leather, hay, cereals, orange peel and cinnamon. I'll try 5 drops of water in this. And water dials down the fruit and ramps up vanilla and toffee. And water again pushes this further into the flavours of caramel with a hint of vanilla. It's not so fruity now. And the finish is drier and shorter. I would say with the Distillers Edition, I would avoid water, I think. Cragganmore 12-year-old is a long-standing secret favourite of mine for over 40 years. If you're going to have more than one whisky in a sitting, then I would have Cragganmore first because it's light, despite the new make. And don't have this after anything that's overly flavourful. Water tames the tongue tingle and brings a bit more sweetness, but is not essential. The Distiller's Edition feels like one you must build up on. The full flavour isn't apparent at first sip, so you need a few before pushing past the thin Speyside tang into the flavours imparted by the extra finishing. The nose is my favourite part about the Distiller's Edition. It's a lot more complex than I anticipated. Having tasted the base spirit, I can say the time in port cask has really helped the complexity, even if the end eventually tapers off into sweetness and grain. It's a welcome Speyside Edition, but treat it with kid gloves, since for all the body in front, it remains surprisingly fragile and easily influenced. You know, Cragganmore spirit is used elsewhere in blends mostly, but this 12-year-old and its sibling, the Distillers Edition, both show the quality of Cragganmore. It's not a typical Speysider due to the slightly heavier and more robust nature of the new make, plus that wisp of soft peat smoke. And the smoke does that like seasoning in a good recipe. It underpins everything and accentuates the other flavours. You know it's there, but it doesn't dominate. These are very nicely done, delicious whiskies to sip and savour. Thank you for listening.